Okay, I want to talk about revolvers today, about how it got a bad rap. If you guys remember, law enforcement used to use revolvers, but also private citizens used to use revolvers back in the day also. And both would have reloads. If they were smart, they would have reloads, just because you want to have a reload with you if you can carry one. So what I did is I labeled law enforcement as number one and private citizen as number two. So number one, we can apply these to law enforcement, and number two, we can apply these to the private citizen. Now, there is a difference between a private citizen and law enforcement, and this is where the biggest screw-ups are, when people tell you that you can't defend yourself with a revolver. So what we need to do is we need to look at the research, and some of this is just common sense. And if you separate law enforcement from the private citizen, you'll find that there is a place for a revolver in your defense. Whereas police back then, they had problems because it was part of their duty and they were more involved each day, having to get into scuffles with people, having to chase criminals and go to trouble. Whereas you, as a private citizen, you were just going about your day avoiding trouble. Wherever you saw it, you would avoid it. That's if you're a smart private citizen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read off number one here for law enforcement. Number one, and these go with law enforcement here. Law enforcement will go to the threat. Will possibly shoot and take cover. You know, it's obvious you want to take cover. We'll have to break cover and chase and reload. Now, this is where the problem happens. You're breaking cover. You have to chase somebody, but then you have to reload your revolver. And this is where you see video clips of acting where a revolver is used by a policeman, and he's trying to reload behind a squad car, and he gets shot because he can't reload fast enough the next 5 or 6 rounds. And then here, more danger day to day, because it's a job to go to bad guys. Okay, so every single day or many days of the year, you're going to check up on potential bad guy things, because that's what law enforcement is. You have to go to the bad guy and you have to arrest him or possibly get into some confrontations with him. Okay, number two, the private citizen right here will not go to the threat. Threat may come to them. Okay, so most of the times you're not going to have any problems because you're staying out of trouble if you're a smart citizen. You're not going to go to the threat. You're going to stay away from that situation. But obviously the threat might come to you, even if you don't want it, and that's understandable. So there are some exceptions to the rule here. Will possibly shoot and take cover, may not have to reload. Okay, if you shoot, like, say, 1 or 2 rounds and you got a few attackers or whatever, and you go take cover, chances are mostly that they're not going to follow you to cover. They're just going to get the heck out of there, because gunfights are very quick and very close, and usually people run and scatter. Okay, so you may not have time to reload. Okay, chances are that you are going to be able to have time to reload if you're using your cover properly and you're getting yourself as far from the situation as you can, rather than standing out in the open and getting shot at. And that's one of the problems that the police had, is when they chase somebody, they might be out in the open where they can get ambushed and they don't know where the suspect is, and he shoots them. You don't have to do that. You can stay with your cover. Okay, right here, same like I was saying before, will stay with cover and extract themselves. So you're going to stay with cover, but your objective is to move from cover to cover to cover out of that situation. And then here, less danger day to day because can avoid trouble. And this right here, like I'm saying, you have less danger day to day because you avoid trouble. It's not your job to chase bad guys. It's not your job to do traffic stops and walk up to the window. It's not your job to do drug busts. It's not your job to try to find suspects, okay, and stuff like that. It's not your job to go look at bar fights and domestics and things like that. So that's not your job, whereas a police officer up here has more of a potential to get killed, and basically is in a lion's den out there every day And that's why I appreciate law enforcement officers, because of the danger they put themselves in, because they wear a uniform, so a duck is a duck, and if you see a duck, you're going to shoot a duck. Whereas the private citizen doesn't have to wear a uniform. You can just look like a street painter. You can look like a photographer. You can look any way you want, a clown, and they're not going to suspect that you're a police officer. But although you're not a police officer, you could be concealing a firearm and be dangerous to them if they suddenly, without warning, try to attack you or try to shoot you or something like that. You have a means of defense. Whereas a police officer, when he comes up to the door, they know it's him. They can ambush him. They can set up, all kinds of tricks for that police officer. And I'm talking about people setting up the tricks would be like in drug busts and different things like that, where they set up obstacles and stuff for law enforcement to try to kill them or to try to make it so that's harder for them to be arrested so they can get out the back door or something like that. But so this is what we have to understand right here. We have to put things into context. Put everything into context. Don't just say, oh, that's just a revolver. You're not going to be able to defend yourself with it. Now, do I recommend training with a revolver rather than just letting it sit around? Yeah, I recommend training with it. I recommend doing drills with it and taking classes and becoming proficient with that weapon. Now, if you don't and you just own a revolver, and let's say you have it on your nightstand or something and you're not shooting and you're not practicing, the research shows that usually it doesn't end up in your death when you use a revolver, because most encounters in defense are what they call break in contact, which means the guy sees your gun, you haven't fired a shot, and he just takes off. Or you fire a shot, they take off. Or you hit one guy and they take off. That's usually what happens. But does that mean that we shouldn't train? No. We should train and become proficient with the revolver. So that's the one thing we have to understand. And under no circumstance should you blame what a private citizen does right here on the revolver. For example, there's videos that I know of on YouTube where somebody used a revolver in a defense situation, and they had 5 or 6 shots, and I think they had a reload, and what they did is they stood out in the open where there was 3 guys with guns, and they didn't take advantage of their cover. And they also had something in their left hand that they didn't drop, like a shopping bag or something like that. Now, was it the revolver's fault that happened? No, it was the person behind the gun. It's not the revolver. It's not the 5-shot revolver, 6-shot revolver. It's the person. It's their tactics and how they defended themselves that cost them their life. It had nothing to do with having a low-capacity revolver. So you guys see what I'm getting at? So let's get some logic and some sense here. And I have much more to say about revolvers, too, because of the fact that they've been bashed around so much and so many times that every single gun range and every single firearms instructor and police and you name it, they're always bad-mouthing revolvers, saying, oh, you wouldn't be able to defend yourself with that, you're going to get killed and all that stuff. But the research doesn't show that. And the reason why it doesn't is because Claude Warner, the tactical professor, has 15 to 20,000 actual reports. This isn't just people talking, and gossiping. This is actual reports of how many shots are fired, who the person was, and all the details. And in them 15,000 to 20,000 reports, it's shown that small pistols, revolvers, small calibers were successful in defense situations, and they're not the death sentence that we all thought it was for the private citizen. It's not the death sentence we thought it all was. As a matter of fact, there are many times where if you look at the information, you'll find that for every time a revolver fails in the hands of a private citizen where they get killed from using a revolver, you can find just as many times where, say, a 17-round 9mm where another person gets killed. So it's kind of a 50-50 thing. And if revolvers weren't working, they'd be falling all the time. You'd hear about it all the time, people getting killed with revolvers, but you don't. Why is that? Well, it's because it's the person behind the gun, but not just that. Criminals, when they attack you, they might not know you have a revolver, okay? So they're not going to think in their brain, oh my gosh, he's just got a 5-shot revolver. We could take this guy, no problem, okay? Another thing is a criminal does not count shots when he's being shot at. So as soon as that revolver comes out, they might not know what kind of gun it is from a distance. They don't know if it's a semi-auto or a revolver. And another thing is they're not going to be counting shots, okay? This is all the crap that people make up in their head about revolvers. They tend to think that this is how it's going to go down rather than paying attention to the real research. So you're imagining things in your head about revolvers, about all these multiple attackers and stuff like that. So that's the thing. And you have to understand something about multiple attackers. Even if you had 10 guys and let's say you only had 5 shots and you didn't have your reload with you. Well, out of them 10 guys, if you had a 5-6 shot revolver, how many of them do you think are thinking to themselves, well, geez, the odds are, he's only going to get a few of us, so there's going to be 4 left, so I don't have to worry. No, they're not thinking that. If there's only going to be 4 that's going to be left and the others are going to get a hit, usually they're going to take off. It would be the same thing if I packed skydiving, if I packed 10 parachutes, okay? I packed 10 parachutes and let's say that I made it so that 4 of them aren't going to open up. Are you going to take that chance? I don't think so, okay? You won't take a chance on a parachute. You're definitely not going to take a chance on a bullet. So even though I'm within these 10 people, and even if I think or I know that this guy's got a revolver, I'm not going to take them chances. I'm going to run, okay? So this whole claptrap chatter about these zombies and, this multiple attackers and crazy stuff like that, it's very rare that something like that happens. And like I said before, you're a private citizen. You're not law enforcement, okay? You're going to get out of that situation. If you stay and you're out in the open, well, that's on you. You're dumb, okay? The objective is to get the heck out of there and to only use your firearm if you're in immediate danger. Otherwise, it's a success. If you don't have to fire a shot and these guys take off at you at the gas station when you're pumping gas, okay, because they've seen the revolver, you're at a success. Whereas a police officer, it's not a success because a police officer has to go chase that suspect, okay? So now, not only does he have to chase the suspect, but he doesn't know where the suspect is, but they know who the suspect know who the police are. So they can set up an ambush or they could shoot, in a dark alley somewhere or whatever at the police. So the police are at a disadvantage. You are at an advantage. You're at an advantage because you're going to take off and you're going to extract yourself from that situation. So having more ammo is good, sure. Having a 17-round Glock, sure. It doesn't necessarily mean that revolvers are bad just because you got a 17-round Glock or a 20-round Glock or whatever. Okay? It doesn't mean that revolvers are bad. Okay, it's the person behind the gun and stuff like that. So you can't discount revolvers. The other thing about revolvers is 357 Magnum. I realize that follow-up shots are harder with a revolver, especially 357 Magnum, but it's a more powerful cartridge. So when you hit somebody center of mass with the 357 Magnum, even if you miss, shot placement is important. Even if you miss optimal shot placement, you're going to tear up a lot of stuff with the 125 grain semi-jacketed hollow point than you are with a 9mm. There's a lot more power going into the person with that kind of round, which is why it's more important that your shot placement has got to be good. So the more power and the more recoil a handgun has, the better your shot placement has to be. And the smaller the caliber, like 22 and stuff like that, even though you have accuracy and speed, you have less energy and less terminal effect. So you have to make sure that your shots are not only optimal, but that you fire more shots. So you fire 3 22 caliber rounds to make up for a 40 Smith & Wesson or a 357 like a revolver. So it's the It's the ammo that does it, cooperating together as a magazine or as a cylinder that gets the job done. And research has shown that usually there's only one or at most two attackers. And one of the attackers usually isn't an active attacker, he's just there. So when the first shot rings out, the second one runs. Even in cases of three attackers, one shot rings out, then the other two take off if you hit the first one. So there's a lot of nonsense going on about multiple attackers, because the thing you have to understand, if there's a crowd of 50 people around you and nobody's attacking you, then they're not attackers. And what they're doing in research is they're saying that these guys are multiple attackers. They're not. The only time you can be an attacker is when you attack. If you're not actively attacking, you're not considered an attacker. So that's how that is. But there's a whole lot more I can go through with this and tell you guys about revolvers and how they're used in defense and some of the research that we know about revolvers. And a lot of this research, you could look up Claude Werner, and he'll show you some situations where law enforcement had pulled over cars and stuff like that and got in a shootout. But you have to understand that the cops were chasing the car to begin with. You see, that's not something you're going to do. So you guys have to understand that your mission isn't to go chase people in your car. That's for law enforcement. And that's why law enforcement, if they had revolvers, they're at a bigger disadvantage because of the fact that they're doing more than you're doing. You're just trying to get out of the situation. You're not going to it. Unless you're what they call a sheepdog, where you're taking care of not just you and people you're responsible for, like loved ones or whatever, but you decide that you want to play law enforcement and go protect and save people. And there's nothing wrong with that. But more often than not, it's not that way at all. Even when you guys heard about that mall incident, that guy was only responsible for him and his girlfriend, actually. But he decided to do the sheepdog routine, and he was successful. Could you do it with a revolver? Yeah, you could have. You could have moved up to them beams that were in the mall and got good cover and took a few shots and accomplished the same thing. And some guys that carry revolvers, they have 357 Magnum, or some guys even in our state in Minnesota carry 44 Magnum, and they conceal carry it. I don't know how they fit it in the pants, but they do, or open carry. But once again, that person that was in the mall, who's to say that they didn't have body armor on or something like that? So there is a place for revolvers and more powerful 357 Magnum cartridges in a 2-3 inch barrel to resolve some of them problems. Whereas the SIG 365 9mm, you're losing quite a bit of energy, to deal with that body armor. If there is some body armor, you want to make sure you have enough power to either get through it or to knock the guy in a way that he's going to know he's been hit by something. So, but anyway, thanks for watching, you guys.